It's Chelsea.
It's Nina.
And you're in the Critics' Kingdom.
Hello. So, for today, we're going to be covering Double Teamed, which came out in 2002. I remember really enjoying it when I was a kid.
Oh, I loved this film when I was little. I think it's partly because when I was younger, I was very much sort of what we called tomboys. I don't know if that term is still as used today.
Yeah.
But I definitely
like the
fell.
Sports.
Yeah, I fell under that category. I used to play touch football with my friends after school and stuff like that. So I really ate up all of this. Like I ate up the sports movies generally, but I really enjoyed the female sports movies. And this one, was two girls playing basketball, which was my favorite sport when I was younger.
Yeah.
In Bulls colors.
So yeah.
I was just like, this is for me.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I've always wanted. So I used to definitely enjoy this one a lot.
Yeah, no, I used to enjoy this one a lot too. I don't know if I wasn't not really a sports kid, but I don't know. I just used to like it a lot. It was fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun time.
Good time. So I guess I'll get into our recap for today. So essentially the film starts off and we pretty much get a glimpse of, the morning routine of these two girls. And we see that these two twins, Heather and Heidi, of them, Heather seems to be the sort of hardworking, very dedicated to her athletic life twin. And Heidi is the I'm sleeping in past that alarm. I need 2 alarms to get up.
Right.
And I'll play, but certainly have other interests.
Right.
Twin.
More than just athleticism.
Exactly. Meanwhile, they definitely have, the mom who sees them as sort of full people. And their dad who also does fundamentally, but is also, a father with 2 6'5" freshman girls. And is
who have natural athletic
ability. He's great. Not cash cows per se, but because this is pre that, which we'll get into a bit later, but they can do something that I can fundamentally connect with them on at all times.
Yeah.
Which also obviously means that he clearly leans into Heather a little bit more than Heidi, because she's the one who seems to be all gung-ho about it.
Yeah, they're both really good volleyball players.
Yeah, so they're playing volleyball at the beginning. At the volleyball practice, he essentially runs into another parent who says to him, are the scoutsmen love them? And he's like, what are you talking about? And the other parent is like, you don't have scouts looking at them? They're huge, they're this, they're that. They're really good. You should have scouts looking at them. He's like, this early? That seems a little much. But the guy essentially breaks it down for him that bruh, how are they going to go to D1 schools? Do you have the money to pay for that?
Right.
Probably not. This is how this game sort of works.
Keep in mind, this is set in 1985, so this is not now.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, and college isn't automatically on the table for everybody as well.
It was a very different time.
Yeah. So, and it's based on a true story.
Yeah,
well, so
it's based on a true story.
All these things are important to note at the top. But yeah, essentially, so their dad is kind of wait a minute, I never thought about that. Yeah, we got to get them into a great sports program because their school doesn't really have one, I believe, or if it does, it's not very good. They go to a private Catholic school, I believe.
It's not a place that you would get scouted from, basically.
Yeah, but it's a private Catholic school, I think.
Yeah, it's a really small little private school.
Yeah, in the film. And there's a public school that that has a fantastic sports program, but they don't live in the correct district for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the father, sort of goes and convinces the principal to give them a certain amount of time to move.
Yeah.
So that they can live in that district, so that he can send the girls to that private school.
The public school.
That public school, yes. Mm-hmm. So they tell the girls, and they're obviously quite upset. They're about to start high school. That's the year that they're beginning. It's freshman year, so they're kind of well, all of our friends aren't there. And they have the regular, the reasonable fears any 14-year-old would have. And their dad sort of puts his foot down and is like, no, you guys have to get scouted. That's the, you have to get scholarships. That's the only way that you're going to be able to go to college. Mm-hmm. So you're going to go to this new school so that you can play volleyball, which is in the spring. They go to school, Heidi is the more sort of social of the twins,
Yeah.
and she has always wanted to try drama club and all of that kind of stuff. So she sort of starts off at school pretty well. She meets a new friend kind of right away via drama club and sort of getting involved with all of that. Heather has a bit of a harder time adjusting. She's kind of lonely for the first bit of it and goes to practice her volleyball because, again, like, even though it's in the spring, because, again, she's
she's that type of person.
And it's truly her. That's her. It's not coming from a parent. It's
she's
like that's
she's
her
a Kobe
natural
type. Like, she will practice till she can't.
Literally.
Yeah.
Literally what happens in this film. And in doing so, she stumbles upon the girls' basketball team playing. They're clearly horrible with one star player that's really good. Everybody else is pretty much garbage. And the coach looks at her, like, dies a little inside and is like, please, please, please. Please come join us. You're gigantic. You could be wonderful.
Right.
And she's kind of intrigued. She thinks it could be a great sort of conditioning situation. So she joins the basketball team. And everything's sort of, going fine a little bit. Nikki's not great to her because she thinks that she's coming in to steal her spotlight. Nikki's the little point guard. Mm-hmm. She is little in comparison to them. Everybody is, but yeah, everybody are. But yeah, so they're kind of doing their separate things. There's a party beginning of the school year at Nikki's house that Heidi ends up going to, and at the party, it's a bunch of rich kids that live in this neighborhood. It's a very wealthy neighborhood, it seems. Higher income neighborhood. Nikki's house is really nice. Heidi, because she's 14, lies about where her own family lives, and their socioeconomic status to fit in, and literally gives them a fake address. So that just is going to come back in a bit. But when she gets home, she's eventually told, like, I think the next day or the day after, by her father that, like, she will also be joining the basketball team because he talked to the coach, and there are two of them, and the coach is very excited about that prospect. He thinks it's a great way for her to stay in shape until, volleyball season. She's very upset about it because she wants to do drama, and she planned to play the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz because she's the only one that fits the costume. But her dad just, again, puts his foot down and is like, no, this is the path that you're going to be on. And she's upset about that, but Heather's sort of upset with her because Heather, feels that, like, this was supposed to be her thing that she had that was, on her own, separate from her sister. So they're kind of fighting with each other for a little bit. And they're also, like, they're fighting with each other, but then they're also fighting with the team because the team isn't a fan of the two of them either. So it's a whole sort of, they're just in a mess. And they have the first game, and it's, like it's an inter-squad game that they do at the top of this, like, black versus red. And in that game, Nikki ends up being benched because, she's not necessarily passing the ball and, like, not necessarily being a team player. And this upsets her deeply. So she goes to the principal and leaves an anonymous letter showing the girl's real address. We don't ever see her tail them or anything like that, I don't think.
No, I don't know.
But it is weird to think about her tailing them.
No, I feel like she must have just looked through some files or something.
Maybe. But anyway, so she leaves that info with the girl's real address, and the principal is essentially like, bruh, I'm going to kick your girls out of the school. Their dad pretty much, which I think is, he handles this well, where he says, don't punish these girls for my mistake because I wasn't diligent about getting us into this district. Give me a chance to actually do that this time. I'll be better. So they up and they move from their nice middle class home to an apartment complex that should be called Sandy Shore. The H is missing, so it's literally called Sandy Shore. And one of the twins rightly claims as they drive up that they are moving into an infected wound. And yeah, it's just a very different, it's a small apartment, obviously in the lower income part of that district, where you in theory would expect the people who, I guess it's the people who attend to those in the higher district live. And they're just not, having a good time with that. So everyone's generally just in a bad place. They're not really working as a team at all. And essentially the coach tells them about this tournament at Christmas that is coming up, but he's only going to let them do that if they work as a team, and they all have to pay their own way. So they get it together, and we start to get all the fun basketball montages of them not just messing around, but them actually playing well as a team together. And they go to the tournament. The girls, Heidi and Heather, because they all have money, they work, we get a nice little montage of them cleaning boats and doing a hat dance, all the fun stuff, to make money to go on this tournament. They end up losing, as the team ends up losing, but they make it to the finals. They lose in the finals, and Heather actually, even though she's on the losing team, ends up getting the MVP trophy for the tournament. So that's pretty cool. They're still on the outs with Nikki, but when they get back to LA, when they get back from New York, they see at the airport, or Heather sees at the airport, that Nikki is sitting alone, sort of like waiting for a family member, and her dad doesn't show up. Her dad's driver shows up, and it's just like, he's not gonna make it again. Sorry, homie. But we can spend Christmas together. And Nikki's kind of clearly deeply disappointed. So Heather and Heidi reluctantly at first sort of reach out, a welcoming hand, and Nikki comes over to their apartment for the evening to spend Christmas night. They eat these bean bacon cheese sandwiches that their father makes, which I remember thinking looked awesome as a kid. I guess they remind me of Sloppy Joes. Now that I am older, that is a hot mess.
Yeah, actively disgusting. Don't eat that.
Don't even, it was we cringed. Literally cringed. But yeah, so now, Nikki and the girls are friends, and they essentially begin to play really well. And that night they actually find out that the school heartthrob also lives in that complex, so he's also broke. And he becomes, their practice partner, and he again helps them train that night, helps them practice and sort of build up some skill. At the next basketball game, Heidi makes the winning shot, which puts Heather in a weird position because she's essentially a sore winner. That's essentially what happens. She's just like, I'm not used to being second best, doesn't take it very well. So she goes home and starts to train really, really hard with Galen, even though he's telling her to stop. She doesn't, ends up falling and breaking her ankle, which means that she's going to sit out on the next game, which is the last game of the film. Mm-hmm. And in that game, they're playing hard, but they're playing hard against another team. And Nikki's actually not playing particularly well, until we see that the twins' father went and found Nikki's father wherever he was and brought him to the basketball game. And Nikki, upon seeing this, shows the fuck up. She's like, all right, cool, I'm here, I'm gonna do what I gotta do. So this helps, but it's not necessarily. And Nikki gets 2 foul shots, so this helps, but it's not enough to bring them all the way back up. And essentially at the last few seconds of the game, they are down by a point while Nikki is taking, after Nikki takes her foul shots. And then Heather limps off the court. She gets up, she sort of pans somebody her crutches around. Does she use her crutches? Doesn't matter. No, she limps off the court.
She puts them on the door.
Limps off the court and goes away while they are having a timeout. She tells them to stall. She limps back on the court fully outfitted.
Out. Yeah.
And they let her play, which don't make no sense. That would never actually happen, at least not in 2020.
No.
The school board would definitely see that as a lawsuit waiting to happen. But all right, so they let Heather play, and she does this little not twin shuffle. Her sister has this little shuffle that she does. So she does the little shuffle to get the ball, to cross the other team, and then throws the ball seemingly into nowhere. It's this twin pass that they do that's supposed to be about twin tuition, even though there are many sports play that you can design where you throw a ball into seemingly nowhere and someone knows to be there to get it. But anyway, in this it's twin tuition, and Heidi just knows to be there at that moment, gets the ball, shoots, scores the winning goal, and that is, they win, mm-hmm. the winning goal, the winning basket, and that is the end of Double Teamed.
Yeah. So we'll be right back with the review. So, for the review portion of Double Teamed, I mean, I think there's like a few things in this one that I feel like you notice off the bat. I think one of them is it was directed by one of our DCOM faves, Dwayne Dunham.
Oh, the master is back.
He did this one as well, so shout out to him again.
It's so nice to see you when you show up.
And then
I wish you did all of them.
I know.
Well, I mean, you know, there are other great ones, but you're just fantastic.
Yeah, no, he's great at the ones that he directed. I think another thing that we talked about, which was pretty common at this time period, like this came out in like 2002, was very much this like twin trope that was like a thing where it's like one is really smart or like one is really whatever, and then the other one is like really like fashion oriented and like less intelligent or less like typically like it's like that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just like you got one was one was the other, you know.
And here's the thing, I know a few twins in real life, and I don't know how much that actually holds up. Like the twins that I know in real life are, and I mean maybe it's because they're all fraternal, but they tend to be, but they are like I know pretty well like a set of female twins, a set of male twins, and then a fraternal male-female twin combination. And in all of those scenarios, so I don't think it's like a gender thing at all, but in all of those scenarios, like they are different, but they tend to like similar things. And I don't know if that's upbringing or
whatever,
you know, but like they tend to like similar things. So I just wonder, especially since this is based on a real story, how legitimate that is, like whether or not that was made for TV, made for the era of Mary-Kate and Ashley, like built into their characters, or if that was something that was like real heavy and true to them as individuals.
I know when I looked up Heidi, she actually did want to be in theater. So that part was accurate, but yeah, it's like I think it just always goes back to like.
But did Heather also like show tunes?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
didn't
want to be a there, but like show tunes. Like,
I think it was also like
curious.
How deeply did it go, or was it just like we have a couple interests that differ, you know, which like would be the same with anybody,
exactly.
or any siblings. But you know, if you're a twin, let us know.
Appy, like the inbox is open.
Yeah, like let us know how that really is and living that twin life. Also, this one was fun because it's a period piece. Like it was supposed to be set in Redondo Beach
it's
in 1985.
In the most literal way, it's
legitimately a period piece.
I don't recall, like we caught it now watching it, right? Like we see like the biker shorts and just like like the.
Like what she was wearing to work out was very
and
like
the side ponytails. 80s. We were like, oh wait.
Or like the shrug like sweaters, and it's just like okay.
But when I was younger, it didn't read to me like that at all.
Same. No, I did until we rewatched it. I did not realize this was like not supposed to be set in 2002.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's weird because I knew it was based on a true story, but it still just didn't.
Especially because at the end, like they did the whole like they're facing off against each other like as grown up, supposedly like 10 years later. But it just never clicked.
Did not. When I was a kid, I did not catch any of that.
Just did not click at all.
Which is again to say a lot about kid, like many things go over kids' heads.
A lot of things. Just truly did not remember that. But
they self-censor very well.
But I also think that like a period like and to be fair, I think Disney actually did the like period piece part of it pretty well. Like they very much like aesthetically it looks 80s, in terms of like what they're wearing and like how people were like acting and like all of that. Like it was very like, okay, like you guys committed to it happening in 85. But I also feel like that was such a close time period from where we were when this came out that maybe that's why we didn't really catch it.
That we were just like, oh yeah, it's like that's how to me like that's like when they're in New York and stuff like that. I know that it's not New York, but like that's what Sleepless in Seattle looked like to my 9 or 10-year-old eyes.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like the same thing.
Yeah, no, I feel the same. So maybe that's also why, because it was a closer period. Whereas I feel like if you were to come out with like a movie like this now and it was set in 1985, you might recognize it more easily because it's so different from what the kids are experiencing now. Yeah. Not saying there wasn't a difference between 85 and 2002, but like it's just closer. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Like even I can even imagine it could be like they can track your location. Why would you lie? Like they know where you are. Like
it's so different. But I feel like we were still very analog at this point. Yeah, so a lot of the things didn't seem that different. So I feel like that's one of the reasons we didn't catch it.
Like, they can look that address up.
Right.
But she has to drive by and see that's a donut.
She literally has to
make
she
that
has to remember
trek.
said address. She has to remember said address and house number, and then drive by. Like, it's like...
Yeah, there are multiples, which is why I think, like, I do feel like she, like, tailed them to some degree.
She must have done something.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, or maybe the lawyer just says we can't find this address, but still.
Yeah, no, she did something.
I feel like she put in some work, or she made her
driver.
Yep,
she made the driver
drive up and down.
She made the poor driver do it
for them.
And I think another interesting part of this one was also the fact that instead of the usual, like, oh, we're like in a public school and we got to move to a private school to get a bunch of resources and opportunities, they did the opposite with this one, where they were already in a private school and then needed to go to a public school to get the opportunities that their father was specifically looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the class difference in that I think you don't see very often in just in media, like the idea of like public doesn't always equal poor.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's what's always like portrayed a lot, and I feel like for a lot of schools it's very much just like America as a concept is just where you live will determine how your like schools and health and all of that is. So it's like if you live in a relatively wealthy incomed area, you will probably have a really good public school near you, you know? New York's a little bit different.
Yeah,
New York City, I should say.
I think
not
that
New York State.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that might exist in media the way it does because of that northeastern sort of elite, like, there's just like in the Northeast, in the like New England section of the world, you know what I mean, like it has this history where the haves essentially in that space, they do have a tendency to like, okay, we're shipping our kids here, or we're sending our kids to this school. They have a tendency to like literally pay, right? They actually do send them to like private prep schools and such. As opposed to, I think, in other areas, like I think in LA would probably be an example of that, though I can't say that for sure because I don't know the ins and outs of that school system. I think in other places, what you actually end up getting more often is that people invest where they live.
Yeah.
So if you're living in a neighborhood where there are wealthy people, instead of people then sending their kid to another private school, they just invest in the school that's there.
Right.
And so that school has all of those resources that the private school would have. It's just that in other places that comes through being able to pay tuition. Here it comes through all of my tax dollars go directly to this school.
Exactly.
And then I can do it. And then maybe only one parent has to work, so somebody does have time to do bake sales. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like fundraisers, and people do have the money to spend on bake sales and things of that nature. You know, so
yeah, it's different. I feel like most people like know this, but yeah, it's like if you, depending on where you live, determines like how your like public schooling system is. So, and I feel like that's the weird thing with New York is like there isn't that like middle ground that I feel like exists in a lot of other states. Like doesn't really exist here as much. It's very much like you're either like up, or you're very like not so up. You know, so I
get a little bit more in between when you go into the outer boroughs. Like you get sort of truer middle class out there. Yeah, but not in New York City proper, or not New York City proper, in Manhattan proper. I'm thinking the city proper. Yeah. In Manhattan proper, that's real. I would say it's not really. Not really. Like you have your areas where you have people who would think that they're middle class, but comparatively to like the rest of the country, if anything, they're like upper middle class. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. Like they might not be. All right, you're not living on Central Park West or Park Avenue, but you know you are living in Soho. You are living in the Lower East Side. Right. You know what I mean? Like you're actually much better off than you realize. And if you took that money to anywhere else in the country, you'd be chilling. You'd be balling. So yeah. No, I think it's just a very different. It's a very different thing from what we normally see, and then just also showing. I feel like actually the inequities of like the education system, ironically. Yeah. Just because it's like it is really random that you can go to a public school and it has like 3 times the amount of resources than like a private school in the area that's closer to you. Because again, the thing is they're not
middle class, and even early on in the film, the dad is like, well, like, I didn't do big law because we wanted to give all of our time and everything to the girls. He says that to his wife. So I think he's like some sort of lawyer, but they don't say what type.
Yeah.
But he's basically not breaking in the big bucks,
and that's a choice.
Be doing.
And that's a choice.
And it was a conscious thing to not do that, but it's also because I think they live in an area and they can afford that private school that's like, it's going to give you a good education.
Yeah.
Before he started thinking about like the whole athletics aspect of things.
But they're still worried about college, which is also an interesting thing in this, like the idea that you're paying for the private school, but that also means that you're definitely not paying a lot.
Right.
And again, that comes back to, like, I'm very used to the thing of, a prep school, because a prep school in New York, you're paying college tuition. It's often you're paying more. Like, you're paying
upwards of $20K. Like,
I mean, you're paying, some of them you're paying a lot more than that, actually.
Right. No, but that's what I'm saying, upwards of that.
Oh,
a year.
Like past 20K. Yeah.
Right. Upwards of 20K a year.
A lot of them you're paying close, like, you're 50, 55K.
Right.
Which is college tuition at, like, high ranking PWIs, like private institutions.
Right.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But elsewhere, again, private school doesn't cost that much money.
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? Like, elsewhere, it's like private school might cost you a couple thousand a year.
Yeah.
So...
Because, all the private schools I went to were, like, before I moved overseas.
Yeah.
Were, like, I don't think my parents were paying over $10K a year.
Exactly. So it's like, then, like, you can go to a private school and still not... And be like, we can afford private school for these kids, but we still can't afford college. You know? Like, that's a socioeconomic... or an economic dynamic that can happen.
Yeah. I actually feel like this is a very good representation of, like, a true, like, I'll say of that time, 80s to, like, early 90s, like, middle class family.
Yeah.
Where it's just, like, we're comfortable, but we're not well off.
For sure. Which I guess that sort of leads me into, a bit of a question or just an open topic to consider. Because they do choose, and when I say choose, I mean their father and their mother, goes along, agrees.
Yeah.
They do choose to leave what is a comfortable life, a comfortable place. Like I said, they have a very nice, like, home.
Typical,
they have a genuine, like...
Typical suburbia. Like... Yeah.
The girls share a room, I think.
Yeah, like, you have made the American dream. It's in their life.
Great house, like, the type of place where it's like, I get why they're upset when they pull up and they see, like...
We're in an apartment.
This little apartment building where, like, they don't even, like, the signs not even put together. Not to say that, like, that automatically means that somewhere is, like, down the dumps. They didn't move somewhere with bed bugs and paint chipping off. Like, let's be clear about that.
Right.
But,
a house
it's different from an apartment. And they are not, I would say that when I look at that apartment, it's not like they're moving to the equivalent, in theory.
Yeah.
The equivalent of that house.
Right.
Or what that, like... Each dollar in that apartment seems to be worth less than the dollar at that house.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I guess just as a parent, like, I mean, and here's the thing. This story, it's real. It happened. It works out. The girls go to UVA.
Right.
They make the WNBA. Like,
right.
It works out. I think now they're retired and
they're both retired
teachers.
now.
I think.
Yeah,
actually.
they're both teachers.
Yeah, so or coaches or something.
Yeah,
teachers and coaches, something of that nature. But it pans out. But that question of like, like I guess what do we think about that move? Yeah, about that sort of decision.
Yeah, I feel like that's always a hard one, and this was also, I think, as we've said before, a time before professionalization of women's sports.
Yeah.
So their father, in doing what he was doing, was actually looking very ahead because, again, if this had been like a similar situation in like even 2015 or like 2010, like 10 years ago, let's say 2010, he would have been from like age like 13, 14. Scouts are already trying to be on you.
They're 14 now, but like from they were like 10.
Right.
From the moment that they hit like whatever height.
Yeah, it
10,
just would have been a very
like,
different situation, and it wouldn't have been even like, I think, a question.
Yeah.
Whereas in 85, there was no top tier for you to go other than college for women in basketball. So it's just a very different thing. So their father was in a way looking ahead, but at the same time, I do think you have to kind of question, like, but did your daughters actually want to do this? Yes, it worked out for them. And like, it probably was a good decision, but then it's also at the same time, like, but was that really like your decision to make for them?
Yeah, as a parent.
Because yes,
and
Heather would have been into it.
Yeah,
Heidi was not so much.
And even, they went for volleyball. They didn't end up, that's not the path they ended up on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's this weird level to which, like, you put them in a situation that they didn't want to be in, and they actually didn't end up in the situation that you were trying to orchestrate.
Right.
They still managed to forge their own paths,
mm-hmm.
which kind of suggests that no matter what, kids are going to forge their own paths.
Right.
And, like, then, like, sort of what you're doing in the interim is either you're aiding them or you're damaging. You know what I mean? Like, you're either creating a really great bond for the future or putting them in therapy. Like, it's one or the other. But, or at least adding to things that are happening in there that are being discussed in therapy. But I do think, but at the same time, I do think that there's the other side of it, the very real parental side of, they're children. They're 13 at the top of this, or 14, maybe just turned 14.
Right.
But
do they know what they actually want?
They're 14. Do they know what they want? Like, are they capable of making those decisions for themselves?
Mm-hmm.
And most parents, I think, will come down and say, like, no, they're actually not capable of doing that right now. I think that the tide's just kind of turning on that.
Yeah.
At least in what is, quote, progressive, unquote. Those quotes are there very purposefully. Society, they'll, let kids do, let them figure it out, let them tell you what they want, that.
There is a certain
whole
structure
shebang.
they do need.
I mean, yeah, I'm not coming down on it one way or the other. I know that, I'm just saying that now, I know that the conversation is moving in a slightly different direction and moving more in the direction where what he does will be seen as wrong. Yeah. Yeah. Or at least problematic.
Right, making decisions that aren't technically yours to make.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I'm not necessarily going to immediately call it problematic because I don't want to put the problem on it,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say it's a problem, but it is complicated for sure. And I do think that there is a real parental side to it, though, that idea of just, but, they're still children and they are under my, it's not even that they don't know, it's they're under my care, and I love them. Like, these are my kids, I love them, I only want what's good for them. Yeah. And I'm doing that. They don't have foresight. I know that if I had done this, we would have had this. They probably wouldn't, I wouldn't have to be thinking about this, they would have already been in that school. Mm-hmm. I decided not to do that so I could be there with them. I made that sacrifice early on when they were young and they needed it. Now they're getting older and they're going to have to go out into the world and fend for themselves. Yeah. And so I'm going to give them the best tools that I can. And that might mean doing something that they don't like.
Yeah. And I feel like, honestly, that's the thing that happens a lot. It seems with, like, athletes' parents. Like, it really is. Like, anytime you watch the draft, anytime you watch, like, any of these, like, little documentaries that, like, ESPN or whatever will do on people or whatever, like, college sports, and they, like, highlight a kid. It is always, like, it's some commotion and dramas, and it's always, like, somebody had to move from here or go to this private school, like, 7 states away. Like, there's just a lot of, it's so true. But it's, like, it's, like, but everybody knows, like, the game. Like, it's, like, you're going for something that's, the means will justify the end. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's very much, like, the way that we view athletes to a degree at this point, because it's like the payoff if you get there is so great. Yeah. Or so it's perceived. So I do feel like it's something that it's hard, but I do feel like it is one of those things that I think most athlete, it sounds like most athlete, and in athlete I'm also including cheer, dance, all of that. We're doing the full spectrum. I'm not only including typically masculine sports.
Yeah, there's no discrimination in the sports world on this podcast.
On this podcast, no. But I just want to say it. So
yeah, in case y'all were confused.
Yeah, no, but it's like there's a lot of sacrifices. I think that's also anytime you have a kid that's like
exceptional.
Really, really exceptional in any way, something. Yeah. There's always some sort of sacrifice, because the same thing can be said if your kid is like a super genius and you got to send them to
like
local
very artistically talented,
right?
Or like you definitely see it with child stars,
right?
Or not even child stars, but child actors. Period.
Oh yeah,
pilot
season got to move out to LA and live in some crummy apartment.
Exactly.
we're
and
from
homeschool your kid.
Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you're like, okay.
But she wants to be an actress.
Exactly. Bobby has a dream. So.
Yeah. So I feel like it is typical, but it is an important question. Just ask yourself and be like, does the means always justify? Does the means always justify the ends?
Justify the ends.
Yeah.
And and I do, and like I said, I am literally not a point in my life where I can place any judgment on.
We're not parents.
Exactly.
So.
Like I don't got no kids, man. Like I don't.
Just a question.
No, so it's just just something to consider that I think this movie sort of puts to the front. Yeah. And again, I think it is because it's based on a true story.
Mm-hmm.
But it does put it to the front in a very, thoughtful way. It's like it's like not Johnny Tsunami.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Johnny Tsunami puts the same question forward, but it's obviously like they do something wrong. Like they should not have done that to that child.
Right.
This is a lot more nuanced.
Yeah.
Because it's real life. So
a lot more gray area here.
Yeah. So I just thought it was an interesting thing.
Yeah, and I think something else that it's important to note, since like we said it's 85, is just that the WNBA did not exist when they were in high school. So their dad was like at the most being like, oh, they can play in college, and he was just finding out about that, like that even being an option of like, oh, girls can get scholarships to play in college, because I mean, even if you think about
volleyball in college,
because even Title IX had only been approved by 85, only like 20 something years before, because I want to say Title IX was like 60s.
I don't know the specific date on that.
Yeah, I don't know the exact date, but it wasn't that far removed. Like, I would be shocked if it was more than 20 years. So, that was relatively recent when girls could even play sports.
That's one generation, in case y'all are counting.
Could play more than just like pickup sports. So I think
there were straight college campuses, like all women college campuses, where they banned sports.
Right.
Like that was the whole thing.
Right.
It's not.
So I just feel like that's also just
you're not allowed to do that.
That's just an important thing to note, because I know you were saying like our generation very much grew up with like women's professional sports being something that was possible.
Yeah.
But if you were born before, like, because I want to say the WNBA didn't even start till like 89-ish.
Yeah, it was
the cusp of
this took place a couple years before
the WNBA was a thing. Like I think they were in college when it started.
Yeah.
So it was very much like a new thing, but by the time that we became like ourselves, like it could
by the time we became
sentient beings,
cognizant.
Like WNBA was like up and running and like a thing, and so was like women's soccer. Mm-hmm. So it was like we very much grew up with those images, but a lot of, if you were born, prior to like 85, that probably wasn't even something you would have thought of, because it wasn't a thing.
Yeah, and I think that's why. And, we brought this up amongst ourselves earlier, Chelsea, but, when we were both little, we didn't clock. The whole part in this about them sort of being able to get scholarships, and then the end where they talk about the founding of the WNBA and and what do you call those? Not titles, but
the what?
The blurb after.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what, post-credits?
No, because they're not credits. Anyway, the postscript, like when they're just
when they tell you like this is what happened in real life.
Yeah, this is what happened in real life. I don't know the technical term for that. They have they say WNBA was great, and they joined these teams, and we missed all of that when we were kids.
Yeah.
And it is exactly as you were saying, it is because that was something that was so established by the time that we were watching this.
Right.
Or so established to the point where it was normalized for you and I, for everyone, at least everyone born in 93.
Yeah, because by the time
it was normalized.
By 99,
Lisa Leslie was a genuine star.
Yeah, she was on Sister multiple times. Like I knew who, if you were the average person in America, you knew who Lisa Leslie was.
Yeah,
and even now there's so many like women basketball players like Maya Moore and like Skylar Diggins and like just so many big female basketball players. It's not even like a thing, like it is, because obviously they're notoriously underpaid. We should also note that, and more people need to be watching their games because they can play their asses off. Also, they actually protest against things, unlike the men. Would like to note that. And they started protesting earlier than the men. Would also like to note that.
Listen, we are not about silencing women on this podcast. Chelsea,
No.
go ahead and talk your piece.
No, that's just what I wanted to say. The WNBA deserves all the credit because they have been in this fight for years, and they still have to fight to even get paid half of what these guys are getting paid, and it is insane and should not be a thing.
Yeah. We can end the podcast right there if we want to. We can just cut out.
Yes, and just want to say shout out to all the WNBA players because, like, y'all are bomb. Y'all are great.
Yeah.
And you deserve so much more.
Heather and Heidi Burge. Like,
yeah, and Heather and Heidi Burge.
Like, real life, yeah. Shout out, like, I guess we
related to the story,
giving us this film so that we could have this film.
Yeah,
about y'all.
Because it does mean a lot to see yourself like that, and then I think even in the fact that there is a higher place for you to compete beyond just college, and like that, how that's important. It's like it shouldn't only be for guys, and I know they're working on that with like certain other sports because I remember we both watched cheer, and like cheerleading does not have a professional, like there's no professional version of cheer unless you're like a football or basketball cheerleader, which is different than what they do because they're competitive.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot more like intense. Though what the football players and the basketball players, cheerleaders do is also like not easy. They have to smile all the freaking time and be on, and they don't get paid that well either. Would like to note that they barely get minimum wage. They have to have a whole other job.
There are very few women that get paid appropriately. Let's put it that way.
Just one to spotlight
just across the board.
Yes,
across
but
the
especially
globe.
in sports, and especially sports that are deemed as more feminine, they don't get paid enough. They deserve to get paid too.
They really do.
But yes. So it's like there's no competitive version of like, or there's no professional version of like even cheerleading and like even dance unless you're like on the ballet side, and or unless you like start being a choreographer, but that's not like a professional league. So I think there's a long way to go that we have, like a long way we have to go with like sports that are typically done by those who identify as female. And I think this movie was just a great way to show it.
It was. And I think you mentioned this word, which I've sort of picked up on, the competitive, which obviously it's a sports film. Competition is the bread and the butter. But, like what I do like about this film is that it I like that it showcases, like, men are not a factor in this film. I mean, like, all right, you got the heartthrob who, like, helps them practice, and we got
he's such a C plot, too.
The Mama Rose sports daddy, and then we have their coach who's, like, he's really just trying to, like, he's trying to
see another day.
But at the same time, he's actually just trying to, like, get through life. But what I really like about this film is that I like watching women be competitive. And I like the space for women to compete with each other. And I mean, it's not perfect in this because it is done, sort of, it's not about, and I think that it's, it reminds me of that, Chimamanda quote that, Beyonce does use in
Flawless,
where she talks about women, just the idea of women can compete for things that are not the attention of men.
Right.
And that is a good thing. It's a fundamentally good thing. And I guess, like, in like, you could argue that, like, maybe for a scout or for the coach or whatever, but at the end of the day, it is, Nikki is like, basketball is something I have. Like, it's all these girls who are like, basketball is something I have or something I'm good at. And, like, their competition is coming from a place of wanting to be the best.
Right.
At something that is, in theory, outside of, in a vacuum, outside of the realm of, like, men.
Right.
Or, like, revolving around
men
and the attention of men.
Men are not centered.
Yeah. And I really like that about this film. I really like that we get to see that. I think that I can imagine that is something that shaped me as a child. And I do like the way that, it's competition, but there is also support. Like, there's this recognition in it that, like, we can compete and we don't have to harm each other to compete. We compete, and then when we do, like, we do, like, Nikki does something a little messed up, and she does eventually feel bad about it, you know? Eventually. Like, all right, Nikki's going through some things. In all fairness, like, Nikki's daddy is obviously messing this girl's life
He's an
up.
absentee father.
He's deeply absent, and it's screwing this poor child up.
She's
for
a
real.
rich latchkey kid.
Like, actually.
Yeah.
But, you know, Heather and Heidi, like, when they see someone in genuine trouble, this is their competitor. This is someone who on the court, you know, they are not necessarily, which is a teammate, so again, complicated. But in theory, someone who, you know, they're vying for a scholarship with or something of that nature, you know?
Right.
But she's sitting alone at Christmas. And, like, we compete there. Like, yeah, we compete professionally. We compete on this court. We compete in this thing that we love. But we don't have to compete as human beings. Like, we can still be kind to each other. We can still support each other. We don't have, or not necessarily like we have to be extra kind to each other, but we don't have to be unkind to each other. We don't have to go out of our ways to, like, tear each other apart all the way through, because that's the only way that we can succeed.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think that is because it's kind of becoming more common. It wasn't common when this came out.
Mm-hmm.
It was less common, you know, like, you get a little bit of it and gotta kick it up for sure. Rip Girls, it's a little different. It's a little more, you know, friendship things. But, you know, it was just nice seeing it here, sort of at the forefront, or at the first non-surface level, if you, like, dig a little deeper, think a little harder, and I just appreciate that. Yeah.
I think, and, you know, to end it, you know, would you show this to the babies?
Oh, yeah, man. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
It'd be really fun. And I think it would be fun in a true nostalgic fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in that way of, like, do you guys want to watch a film, like, let's watch a sports film that I used to love. Like, you know, I would put it to them that way. Just because I think it still holds up, and, you know, just even from, like, what we talked about, like, I think that there's a lot to be gained from it, that you don't have to talk about later. But, you know, in the same way that, like I said, I'm sure watching these girls interact in this way, like, certain things just seeped into me, certain ways of looking at the world seeped into me, and, you know, it's still fun, and it's a sports movie, dude. Like, sports movies are always great. Watching people, like, do physical things, even though it's cutaways and you know that they didn't shoot that basket when you're an adult, especially when you're a kid, like, they're fun. It's, you know, and underdog stories are fun, and watching people put in the work and reap the reward it's candy. It's like, it's literally human psyche candy. Mm-hmm. We eat it up. There's a reason why sports are what they are.
Yeah.
So,
no.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I would definitely show it to my kids. Would definitely recommend a rewatch if you haven't watched it in a minute and you really used to like it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's also the 80s, so, you know, there's some fun, like, style moments because of that in here. Lots of side ponytails. But yeah, I think it's a fun one, and it's good, I think, for, like, you know, I think daughters and sons, and, you know, kids that don't identify as either or whatever would really enjoy it.
Yeah, because there are tall freak shows in it.
Yeah,
like, that's how they're
like,
described.
they transcend a lot, just because it's like they're both like objectively pretty, but then it's like they're also like 6'5", and they're like going, and literally there's a good 5-minute montage where people are just staring at them.
It's like, I look at them and I'm like, watching it, I'm like, it would be, can you imagine for, like, a 6 foot, whatever they are, 3 to 5, 6 foot 3 to 5 blonde twins showed up the first day of high school? It would be like being visited by like Freya and Frigg. Like, that's what it would be like. It's like, have the Viking gods descended? Is this the beginning?
It's like the beginning of the end.
Beginning of the end.
No, it's so true.
Why do the gods, the quote unquote gods, always descend on America? Why is it always here first? Like, it would. That's how I would feel.
Like,
so I get it. I get that response. But I think, so it even has that little nod for any kid who feels out of place physically.
Or tall, because I used to feel like that too. I was really tall.
They get to say, like, oh, look at these girls. Well, they were like that, but they
got over it. They got over it.
Or
it's just a good movie for awkwardness.
Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's a good movie for awkwardness. Even though, to be fair, they're never really awkward about it, which I like. Like, they're both just...
Heather's mad awkward. She's socially awkward, for sure.
She's socially awkward, but they're never awkward about the height. Because I know what that feels like, because I felt like that. Mm. Like, it's a very specific thing when you're, like, you feel awkward because like you don't feel comfortable in your body and in your height.
Yeah.
And they don't have that. They still have like the confidence. Like they're just like, it is what it is. Like, so what? Which I think is a healthy attitude to have rather than trying to like shrink yourself, which is what a lot of like tall people do, or tall girls, I'll say. I don't know if this happens as much with guys because I'm not a guy, but I know, like I felt like that when I was like 5'7" and like 13. I ended up like staying that height, so it was fine. But
yeah, I never had that.
So
problem.
It leveled out. It leveled
I've
out.
been small my whole life, but you know.
Shout out to the tall girls though.
Yeah, and no
I'm
one
tall
should...
passing. That's what I like to say because I'm like 5'7" and like people think I'm tall and then like, oh no, you're like not tall.
I'm entirely not 5'7" at all, but I'm happy to be a tall girl ally.
A tall girl
I'm
ally.
happy to be that person because I don't think anyone should shrink themselves ever, like in any, not into their body, not into their mind, not into their perspective,
not
to
your
a
abilities.
perspective. Like, I don't think anybody should shrink themselves at all. And if for no other reason, that's why you should rewatch this film.
Yeah, don't shrink yourself. This is a great film to literally get into that. Like, be your full 6'5" self, whether that's physically or mentally or just emotionally.
Yeah, always.
Be your full self, whatever that may be.
So with that, we will leave you for this week, and we will catch you guys next Wednesday.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.